Three perspectives on the masculine and the feminine, Jung, the Tao, and Christian wisdom toward a sacred union of opposites. The human mind holds within itself a symbolic universe populated by characters, settings, and objects that do not stem from direct experience, but from a much older and deeper memory. This inner world corresponds to what psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung called archetypes, universal structures of the collective unconscious that shape how we perceive, feel, and give meaning to the world. These forms, charged with psychic energy, manifest in myths, dreams, religions, and works of art throughout human history. They are not cultural inventions, but living presences that emerge from the very roots of the psyche. Archetypes can take on multiple faces and configurations: the mother, the father, the witch, the wise old man, the angel, the demon. They appear in family stories, on television, in religious imagery, in films, in childhood nightmares, and in fantasies of hope. Their installation in the mind is neither rational nor explicit. It is symbolic, emotional, affective. Thus, everyday reality, with its narratives, images, and rituals, becomes a mirror in which these deep figures are reflected and take shape. From another ancient tradition, the I Ching, a Chinese oracle that began as a guide for agriculture and social life, gradually evolved into a spiritual tool of extraordinary subtlety. Each of its hexagrams functions as a symbolic description of states of the soul. Consulting it does not predict the future but reveals from what place in the unconscious the seeker is acting. In this sense, it is an oracular mirror of the inner world, a symbolic map that allows us to clearly see the psychic energy at play. Within this universe of archetypes, two stand out for their clarity in expressing the dynamics of opposites: the anima and the animus. These are internal representations of the feminine in men and the masculine in women, respectively. They are not reducible to social notions of gender or external characteristics but refer to energetic principles that inhabit every human being, symbolic manifestations of the duality inherent in life. This essay proposes an exploration of these archetypes not only from Jungian psychology but also through the lens of Taoism, where yin and yang serve a similar function as complementary and eternally interwoven principles. It also delves into spiritual resonances within non-official Christian traditions, especially those that portray a less patriarchal and more androgynous image of the soul and of Christ. The text thus moves between depth psychology, Eastern wisdom, and esoteric spirituality, with the conviction that the human soul can only be fully understood when its two faces, the masculine and the feminine, the sun and the moon, the word and the mystery, are acknowledged and integrated. Within the symbolic system proposed by Carl Gustav Jung, the anima and animus are two of the most significant archetypes for understanding the deep structure of the soul. Both represent the unconscious and complementary aspects of the opposite sexual principle within the individual psyche. In simple terms, the anima is the image of the feminine within a man, and the animus, the image of the masculine within a woman. But beyond this superficial definition, these figures embody emotional experiences, early bonds, idealized projections, and paths of spiritual transformation. In most cases, the first form the anima takes in a man's unconscious is the figure of the mother, not only because of her biological role, but due to the emotional intensity of the bond. For the child, the mother is an enveloping presence, nourishment, touch, power, and mystery. The same occurs, in reverse, with the animus, which often begins by taking the shape of the father or the dominant male figure in the child's environment. These images are not static or fixed. They transform over time as the soul matures. Jung observed that both the anima and animus undergo a series of evolutionary stages within the psyche, and that the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, involves recognizing these figures, differentiating them from external projections, and allowing for their inner transformation. The evolution of the anima in a man. The anima passes through several phases that symbolize the psychological growth of his relationship with the inner feminine. 1. The mother. In this stage, the anima appears as a protective or devouring figure, nurturing or possessive. The man tends to unconsciously seek in women a continuation of his mother. 2. The erotic woman. She appears as a seductive, sexualized figure, sometimes unattainable or dangerous. She may embody both the muse and the femme fatale. 3. The wise woman. This is the figure who guides, teaches, and mediates between the unconscious and the conscious. Here, the anima becomes a psychopomp, that is, a bridge toward the totality of the self. 4. The feminine wholeness. The highest stage, where the anima ceases to be a projected figure and is integrated as a living, conscious part of the man's soul. The evolution of the animist in a woman. The animus also progresses through various stages, though its nature is often more abstract, verbal, ideological, or spiritual. 1. The authoritarian father or the hero. The animus may begin as a dominant voice, an external masculine ideal, or an inner figure that imposes judgment and demands. 2. The man of opinion. In this phase, the animus takes the form of fixed ideas, maxims, and dogmatic phrases, often appearing as a kind of inner tribunal. 3. The spiritual guide. Symbolized by figures such as Hermes, Apollo, or Mercury, the animus becomes a messenger between worlds, a bearer of wisdom, and a mediator of the inner logos. 4. The integration of the logos. As culmination, the animus becomes a creative, fecundating energy that allows the woman to think freely, act decisively, and create from her own center. These stages are neither linear nor mutually exclusive. Often, several coexist within the same person or reappear in different phases of life. What matters is not to eliminate the anima or animus, but to recognize them, engage in dialogue with them, stop projecting them blindly, and allow them to guide us toward broader awareness. In short, anima and animus are archetypal figures of the soul that reveal how the masculine-feminine polarity operates within every human being. When their inner presence becomes conscious, they cease to function as blind fate or compulsive love patterns and instead become pathways to a deeper wisdom, one in which opposites do not exclude each other, but mutually fertilize. At the heart of Taoist thought lies an image of balance, movement, and polarity. The symbol of yin and yang. Two halves that contain each other, revolve around one another, and represent the universe's complementary forces. Yin, dark, receptive, moist, feminine, and yang, bright, active, dry, masculine, are not conflicting opposites but principles that need and transform one another. Where one exists, there is always a seed of the other. Nothing exists in a pure state. Everything is relationship. This vision is not only cosmological, it is also deeply biological, energetic, and spiritual. In human beings, this duality is expressed not only symbolically but physically. We all have both masculine and feminine hormones, brain hemispheres with complementary functions, active and receptive impulses, times of expansion and moments of withdrawal. In plants, in the cycles of day and night, in the behavior of the elements, this yin-yang logic manifests constantly. Heaven is seen as the father, a creative, generative, penetrating principle. The earth, on the other hand, is the mother, a containing, receptive, nurturing principle. Life can only exist in their harmonious relationship. From this worldview, every true union, whether in nature, in the body, or in the soul, requires balance between these two principles. The masculine must offer a seed that is healthy, clear, and firm. The feminine, for its part, must be open and free of impurities to receive and transform it into something alive. If what is sown is corrupted, what grows will be weak or toxic. If the soil is filled with residue, parasites, or blockages, no seed will fully flourish. This is why Taoism, like many other spiritual traditions, holds that both the active and the receptive principles must undergo processes of purification. In the case of the receptive, the earth, the mind, the feminine, this cleansing takes the form of a symbolic burning, an inner fire that consumes old ideologies, contaminated desires, harmful habits, unresolved traumas. This destruction is not punishment but preparation. Only when the earth is clean can it receive the true seed of heaven. This spiritual fire, often experienced as an existential crisis, loss of meaning, or the collapse of old certainties, has the purpose of restoring the soul's pure capacity to receive. For the human mind, like the earth, is not fertile by nature, but through inner work. When the feminine soul, which also exists within men, has been purified, it can respond to the call of heaven with luminous fertility. In the harmonious union of yin and yang, Giving and receiving become a sacred cycle. The masculine offers, not from ego or a desire to dominate, but from the clarity of its center. The feminine receives, not from lack or passivity, but from a silent fullness that transforms. Thus, both principles refine one another, and the life born from that interaction is a reflection of the Tao. Before institutionalized Christianity, before it became a structure of power, dogma, and control, there existed another form of spirituality, one that recognized the elements of nature as sacred expressions of mystery. Water, fire, air, and earth were not merely resources, but living presences that participated in the divine order. This worldview, shared by many ancient cosmogonies, understood that the human being must live in harmony with the rhythms of creation, and that the soul, in order to ascend, must first take root. In this context, the figure of Jesus, when stripped of the doctrinal layers imposed over time by religious institutions, appears as a spiritual master deeply connected to this ancient wisdom. Some non-canonical Gospels, as well as certain texts attributed to the Essenes, present him not as the founder of a religion, but as an enlightened being, a guide of the soul who spoke of the Heavenly Father but also of the earthly Mother. In his words resonate echoes of Eastern thought, reverence for life, the body as a temple, and purity as a path to communion with the divine. It is no coincidence that various traditions have held that Jesus may have been instructed by sages in the East, in India, Tibet, or by initiatic communities like the Essenes. In these versions, Christ is not merely the Son of God, but a bridge between heaven and earth, a manifestation of the Tao, of the Logos, of the lost balance between the masculine and the feminine. Unfortunately, this dimension was erased, or repressed, by centuries of patriarchal interpretation. The feminine was systematically silenced, Mary Magdalene was degraded, the figure of the Divine Mother suppressed, and the image of the spiritual woman reduced to either the silent virgin or the redeemed sinner. In this symbolic amputation, the earth also lost its sacred dignity. The planet ceased to be seen as mother and was instead treated as an object for exploitation, conquest, and domination. The same pattern applied to women was applied to nature. Thus, a deep imbalance was sown. The masculine principle became inflated in its most rationalist, vertical, warlike expression, while the feminine principle, nurturing, cyclical, intuitive, was degraded, ridiculed, or simply ignored. The consequence of this symbolic rupture is now before us. A humanity that has lost its connection to the soul, an exhausted planet, unbalanced human relationships, and a hollow spirituality that repeats formulas without embodying wisdom. But the figure of Christ, when freed from institutional chains, shines again as an archetype of integration. In him, the Logos is not authoritarian but compassionate. Love is not sentimental but transformative. His message was not about control but about awakening. His path was, ultimately, the path of return to the lost balance, where Father and Mother, heaven and earth, spirit and body, do not oppose each other but recognize and embrace one another. We've explored three distinct approaches: Carl Gustav Jung's depth psychology, the Taoist worldview, and certain esoteric branches of Christianity, with the aim of illuminating one fundamental principle. The harmony between the masculine and the feminine is a necessary condition for the health of the soul, for relationships with others, and for the balance of the world. In the West, it was Jung himself, through his study of the collective unconscious and his engagement with Eastern texts, who sought to restore this ancient wisdom of complementary opposites. He did so through the archetypes of the anima and animus, which represent the inner images of the feminine and masculine soul within each individual. From another tradition, Taoism expressed this same truth through the dynamic of yin and yang, while the I Ching set it in motion through a symbolic, oracular, poetic language. Though this language may at first seem foreign to the Western mind, its teachings do not contradict Jung's, they complete them. Even within early Christian texts, especially those excluded from the official canon, traces remain of a spirituality that honored both the Father and the Mother, heaven and earth. The figure of Christ, when liberated from institutional interpretations, appears as a master of integration and deep wisdom, far from dogma and much closer to the Tao. But all this knowledge, present in such diverse cultures, only becomes meaningful if it is embodied. And for that, it is necessary to look honestly at the modern distortions of the masculine and feminine. Today, both principles have been corrupted by toxic models promoted by media, social networks, and fragmented ideologies. Masculinity, instead of expressing a creative, steady, protective energy, is often reduced to destructive impulses, control, or emptiness. Femininity, instead of cultivating wise receptivity, strong softness, and inner nourishment, is frequently replaced by reactivity, defensive hardness, or mimetic competitiveness. Just as the soil must be purified in agriculture to yield good fruit, so too must the human soul, both in its masculine and feminine dimensions, undergo a process of inner cleansing. Man must reconnect with a healthy creative impulse, capable of sowing without violence or invasion. Woman, with a receptive principle that neither submits nor shuts down nor returns thorns. Each contains something of the other. Creativity and receptivity are not exclusive to any one gender. They are inner dances which, when brought into harmony, give birth to the soul's fertility. To understand this duality and consciously integrate it is more than a symbolic exercise. It is a spiritual task of utmost urgency. For only when we learn to sow with purity and to receive with clarity can the balance that the world so desperately needs be reborn within us.